So as we think about that longevity and sort of the sustainability and what an adaptable culture and adaptable organizations are able to accomplish over time and hold through over time. And then we sort of map that back to sort of our methodology and our framework, and we think about sort of the accelerator model, and we think about the question that we get all the time, which is, okay, so which is the hardest accelerator, right? And we often come back with similar answers, which are sort of the bookends of the spectrum, right? It's really hard to create the sufficient level of true urgency to get a change or a transformation started. And then it's really hard to sustain it and institute it because of all of the different aspects of the system that are in place that are going to reinforce and hold us to our previous culture and our previous ways of working. So as you think about these adaptable organizations, what do you think we can learn from their attributes and from the way that they operate that can help us as leaders and help the people that we teach and help the people that we work with to learn how to better sustain and institute their change?
To me, the first question is, what do we mean when we say sustain, right? What are we sustaining? And I think that's important, particularly given what Vanessa said earlier about it's no longer about episodic change, right? Because in an episodic change event, what you're sustaining is the changes that you've made, right? So I've changed the way I do a certain process. I want to sustain how we do that process. And so the kinds of tools that you use are things like, well, make it easier to do the new process versus the old, take away, things like take away the old system, so I have to use the new system. All of those things work, right? So when you're trying to sustain an episodic change, that's sufficient. When you think about sustainment more in the sense of now what we're talking about continuous change and having to develop change capability and having to develop more adaptability, it's different. Because now actually the question of what does it mean to sustain in some ways is the same question as how do I develop an adaptable organization? Because an adaptable organization is able to constantly make the pivots that are needed to stay relevant, to do the right thing for the employees, to do the right thing for the stakeholders, to do the right thing for the customers. And so the capability that you're developing as you're trying to create an adaptable organization is exactly the same thing you need to be able to sustain change in the sense of the broader sort of continuous change and adaptability rather than episodic change or change events, right?
Yeah. And I think what I would add to that is that when you hear that, it can feel overwhelming. Okay, so to sustain, I have to build this culture organization-wide, and going back to this notion of it being strong, right? And it needs to take root, but how do I do that? So while change isn't episodic anymore, starting to build the muscle with whatever significant, strategically fit for purpose change that you're going through right now, using it almost as a lab, right? Experiment with it, test new behaviors, build new ways of working and capabilities in the context of a very real change, whether it's a digital transformation, M&A, whatever it might be, but intentionally use that as a place to learn and highlight that. So highlight the new ways of working, highlight the experimentation, really help people see how that's transferable to whatever the next change is that comes along. So don't just focus on sort of the tactical or technical elements of the change, but really use it as an opportunity to start to build that capability and that muscle.
Yeah, and I love the idea of what can we learn over the decades, right, of things that continue to work and continue to prove out around adaptable organizations and the attributes of those organizations and how we can build the muscle for ourselves to almost create the adaptability within ourselves as leaders, as at the individual level, to your point earlier, and then all the way through to that organizational level, but starting somewhere and building that muscle over time and thinking about it as a muscle building exercise.